The crystal spires of Valora Prime stretched toward the twin suns like delicate glass sculptures. For 3,000 years, the tall, graceful beings who lived there had known only peace. Their skin shimmered with a pale blue light, and their large eyes held the wisdom of ages spent in study and meditation. Ambassador Kira lived in the highest tower of the capital city. She was old even by Valoran standards, her luminescent skin now faded to the softest glow. Every morning she would stand at her window and watch the peaceful streets below, where her people moved with quiet dignity between libraries and research centers. Today, it's different. The communication crystal on her desk pulsed with urgent red light. Messages flooded in from the outer colonies, each one more terrifying than the last. Kira's hands trembled as she read the reports. Her aide, young Dex, stood beside her with his eyes wide with horror. "The colony on Vexstar 7 has gone silent," Dex whispered. "All 12 million inhabitants. Gone." Kira nodded slowly. It was the 5th world this month. The enemy came from the dark spaces between stars, creatures that defied understanding. The other species called them Devourers, and the name fit perfectly. They consumed everything in their path, absorbing both flesh and metal to grow stronger. "What about our defenses?" Kira asked, though she already knew the answer. "Useless," Dex replied, his voice breaking. "Our energy shields actually make them stronger. They absorb the power and use it against us. Our plasma weapons might as well be feeding them." Through the window, Kira could see other Valorans moving through the streets below. They still believed they were safe, protected by their advanced technology and peaceful ways. They had no idea that death was racing toward them across the void of space. "There must be something," Kira said, more to herself than to Dex. "Some weapon we haven't tried, some alliance we haven't made." The young aide was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said the word that every civilized being in the galaxy feared to speak. "Humans." The crystal in Kira's hand nearly slipped from her grasp. Humans, the Deathworlders. Every child in Valoran space knew the stories of the third planet orbiting the star called Sol. It was a world of such violence and horror that it had created monsters. The beings who lived there were savage, primitive, and dangerous beyond measure. "You cannot be serious," Kira said. "They are warriors," Dex replied. "Their entire species evolved through constant warfare. Their planet tried to kill them every single day, and they not only survived, but thrived. If anyone can stop the Devers..." Kira turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see the first refugee ships arriving from the outer worlds. Families who had lost everything, carrying only the clothes on their backs. Soon, those same ships would be arriving here, fleeing from Valora Prime as it burned. The communication reports painted a clear picture. The Devourers moved like a plague across space, consuming world after world. They learned from each encounter, adapting their biomechanical forms to overcome any defense. Traditional weapons were worse than useless. But humans were different. The few contact reports that existed described them as unpredictable, chaotic, and incredibly dangerous. They came from a world where massive storms could appear without warning, where the very ground could split open and swallow cities, where creatures with razor-sharp teeth lurked in every shadow. "The Council will never approve it," Kira said finally. "The Council is dead," Dex replied quietly. "The Devourers reached Central Station 3 hours ago." The weight of those words hit Kira like a physical blow. She was now the highest-ranking official in what remained of the Valoran Alliance. The decision was hers alone to make, she thought. Of the children in the streets below, playing games that their grandparents had played, she thought of the great libraries filled with the accumulated knowledge of millennia. She thought of the art galleries and music halls, the gentle poetry and peaceful philosophy that defined her people. All of it would be food for the Devourers within days. With shaking hands, Kira activated the long-range communication array. Signal would take time to reach the human homeworld, time they might not have. But what choice was left? "This is Ambassador Kira of the Valoran Alliance." She spoke into the transmitter, her voice steady despite her fear. "We are under attack by an enemy we cannot defeat. Weapons are useless. Our defense is worthless. We need help. She paused, looking out at her beautiful, doomed world one more time. We know your reputation. We know what your world made. We have always feared you, and perhaps we were right to do so. But now, that same strength we feared might be our only salvation. Please, help us. The transmission ended, carrying her desperate plea across the void toward the dreaded Deathworld called Earth. All she could do now was wait and hope that the monsters she was calling would prove to be the right kind of monsters. Outside her window, the twin suns began to set, and for the first time in her long life, Kira wondered if she would ever see them rise again. Admiral Kim Jae stood on the bridge of the massive warship Thunderstrike, staring at the alien message that had just finished decoding. The communication had traveled across half the galaxy to reach Earth, and every word dripped with desperation.
Night 12.
Worlds consumed in 2 weeks, he said quietly, reading the report aloud. Energy weapons made them stronger. Plasma shields absorbed and redirected against defenders. Captain Li Min sat at the tactical station, his fingers dancing across holographic displays showing fleet positions. Sir, this sounds like the Kithra incident from the Outer Rim. Same pattern of consumption and adaptation, but much larger. Scale, added Commander Park, the fleet's science officer. Her dark eyes were fixed on the biological data streaming from the alien transmission. These devourers are learning faster than anything we've encountered. Jay had served in the human defense fleet for 20 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts, defended colonies from hostile wildlife, and even faced down a few alien raiders. But this was different. This was a cry for help from beings who had never spoken to humans before. What do we know about these Valorans? He asked. Park pulled up a holographic display showing the alien species. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow with inner light. Their large eyes held an ancient wisdom, and their movements were careful and precise. Peaceful civilization, Park explained. They've had no major wars for over 3,000 years. Their technology is based on energy manipulation and quantum physics. Very advanced, but they've never needed to weaponize it effectively. No military tradition, Lee observed grimly. They probably think war is something that happens to other people. Jay nodded. Earth had no such luxury. Humanity had crawled out of a world that tried to kill them every single day. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, plagues, and predators that could tear a human apart with ease. Every generation had to fight to survive, and those who couldn't fight didn't live long enough to have children. What's our fleet status? Jay asked. Third battle group is at full readiness, Lee reported. 18 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, 2 assault carriers, and the Thunderstrike. Total personnel, 42,000. Can be ready to move. In 6 hours, Park looked up from her scanner readings, her expression troubled. Admiral, they're expecting maybe a diplomatic mission, a few ships to observe and offer advice. They have no idea what human military doctrine actually looks like. The truth was that most aliens didn't understand humans at all. They saw Earth's harsh environment and assumed it had created nothing but brutal savages. They never bothered to learn that the same world that made humans tough had also taught them the value of cooperation, sacrifice, and protecting the innocent. Send the response, Jay decided. Full deployment. Battle speed. Sir Park said carefully, when they see what we're bringing, they might panic. To them, this will look like an invasion fleet. Jay turned to face his officers through the bridge. Windows. He could see the blue-green curve of Earth below them, peaceful and beautiful, despite its deadly nature. Somewhere down there, children were playing in parks that would have been killing fields on any other world. Families were having dinner in cities built to withstand disasters that would destroy most alien civilizations. Then we'll have to make sure they understand our intentions, he said. Send an encrypted message ahead of the fleet. Tell them we're coming to help, not to conquer. The communication officer, Lieutenant Yunda, looked up from her station. Message sent, sir. Valoran space, 18 days at maximum hyperspace. As the massive human fleet prepared to launch, News of the mission spread throughout Earth's military networks. This wasn't just another patrol or training exercise. This was first contact with a desperate alien civilization, and humanity's response would determine how the galaxy saw them for generations to come. In the fleet's staging area, thousands of Marines checked their equipment. Their armor was designed to operate in environments that would kill most species instantly. Their weapons could punch through starship hulls or precision target individual enemies. Each soldier carried enough firepower to level a city block, but they also carried medical supplies, emergency rations, and engineering tools. Because human military doctrine wasn't just about destroying enemies, it was about protecting innocent people, no matter what species they happened to be. Captain Choi Hae of the assault carrier Storm gathered his officers for a final briefing. Remember, he told them, we're not going to conquer, we're going to save lives. These Valorans have never seen real warfare, and they're about to get a front row seat to how humans fight. Will they understand the difference between strength and brutality? Asked Major Shin Yu, the Marine commander. They will? Choi replied confidently. Because we're going to show them. Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Human officers and crew members prepared for a mission unlike any they had undertaken before. They would travel to an alien world under attack by monsters, and fight an enemy that adapted to every weapon used against it, and somehow convince a peaceful species that the galaxy's most feared warriors were actually there. Salvation, as the first ships engaged their hyperspace drives and disappeared into the void, Admiral J remained on the bridge, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, aliens were dying while waiting for help that might already be too late. But humans had never been good at accepting defeat, especially when innocent lives were at stake. Captain Choi Hae walked through the corridors of his ship with the Valoran observer floating beside him. Delanor moved with the grace of his people, his pale blue skin glowing softly in the artificial light. His 4 large eyes kept darting nervously at the human soldiers they passed. Your warriors are so different, Delanor said through the universal translator. His voice carried a musical quality that made even simple words sound like poetry. Choi stopped at an observation window where they could see the Marine preparation bay below. Hundreds of human soldiers were checking their equipment, their movements quick and efficient. Each one wore armor that looked like it could stop a plasma. Cannon and their weapons were clearly designed for one purpose: killing. Different how? Choi asked, genuinely curious about the alien's perspective. Delanor's skin flickered between blue and pale green, which the translator identified as confusion mixed with fear. On Valora, our defenders use stun weapons that disable enemies without permanent harm. We employ automated systems to minimize risks to our own people, but your soldiers, he paused, watching a Marine load explosive rounds into a rifle. They seem to expect violence. We do, Choi replied simply. Because violence is coming, whether we expect it or not. In the bay below, Sergeant Yoon Da was briefing her squad on boarding operations. The massive woman stood nearly 2 meters. Tall, her augmented muscles clearly visible even under her armor. She hefted a weapon that would have been a crew-served gun for most species, handling it like a simple rifle. Remember, she told her soldiers, these devourers adapt to everything they encounter. Energy weapons make them stronger. Conventional explosives get absorbed and redirected, but they can't adapt to what they don't understand. One of her Marines, a young man named Park Jen, raised his hand. What if they learn to counter our tactics during the fight? Yoon smiled grimly. Then, we change tactics faster than they can adapt. That's what makes us human. Delanor watched this exchange with growing alarm. They speak of death so casually. Do they not fear it? Of course we fear it, Choi said. Fear keeps you alive, but we don't let fear stop us from doing what needs to be done. The truth was more complex than Choi was willing to explain to an alien. Humans had learned to live with death because their homeworld had given them no choice. Every generation faced extinction from natural disasters, climate changes, or the countless predators that hunted them. Those who survived passed on not just their genes, but their knowledge of how to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. In the tactical center, Admiral Kim Jae was reviewing battle plans with his senior staff. Commander Park So had prepared detailed analyses of Devourer behavior patterns, while Captain Lee Min had calculated optimal attack vectors for the upcoming engagement. The enemy's primary advantage is adaptation, Park explained, her fingers moving across holographic displays. They learn from each encounter and modify their biomechanical forms accordingly. Traditional military doctrine calls for overwhelming force applied consistently, but that won't work here, Lee added. Consistent tactics give them time to adapt. Admiral J nodded. So we use chaos doctrine, maximum unpredictability. Telenor, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. I do not understand. How can military operations be chaotic? Surely coordination is essential for success. The human officers exchanged glances. How could they explain to a being from a peaceful world that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all? Watch, Admiral J said, activating a training simulation. The display showed a typical human fleet engagement. But instead of the coordinated formations Telenor expected, he saw something that looked like organized madness. Each ship moved independently, making split-second decisions based on local conditions. Captains switched tactics without warning, adapted to changing circumstances instantly, improvised solutions to problems that their enemies couldn't predict because the humans themselves didn't know what they were going to do next. Your species fights like ... Talana paused, searching for words. Like a storm, unpredictable and terrible. That's the idea, Park said. Humans evolved on a world where adaptation meant survival. We had to learn to think fast, change quickly, and never give up. It's in our genes now. In another part of the ship, Lieutenant Colonel Shin Yu was training his Marines in zero-gravity combat. The soldiers moved through three-dimensional obstacle courses, fighting holographic enemies while dealing with the disorienting effects of weightlessness. Most species would have been helpless in such conditions, but humans had trained for this. Remember, Shin called to his troops, the Devourers have never faced opponents who can fight in vacuum. They're used to enemies who need atmosphere and gravity. Use that advantage. Telenor watched through the observation window as human soldiers performed maneuvers that would have killed his people instantly. They spun through complex rotations while firing weapons, used explosive decompression as a tactical tool, seemed completely comfortable in an environment that was utterly hostile to life. How do you survive such training? He asked Captain Choi. The same way we survive everything else, Choi replied. We adapt, we endure, and we never give up. As the human fleet continued its journey toward Valoran space, Telenar began to understand something that terrified and amazed him in equal measure. These humans weren't just warriors. They were the product of a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them. They had not only survived, but learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy any other species. Soon the Devourers would learn what it meant to face an enemy that had been forged in the crucible of a death world. The space around Valora Prime looked like a nightmare made real. Millions of Devourer bioships swarmed through the system like living darkness, their chitinous hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from the planet's dying defenses. Each creature was the size of a fighter jet, but moved with the fluid grace of a hunting predator. Ambassador Kira. The beautiful energy shields that had protected Valoran worlds for centuries now fed the enemy, making them stronger with every pulse of power. Below them, the crystal cities of her homeworld sparkled in the light of twin suns, unaware that death was only hours away. Long-range sensors are detecting something, reported Dex, his voice tight with fear. Massive energy signatures approaching from hyperspace. Before Kira could respond, Space itself seemed to tear apart. Brilliant flashes of white light erupted across the system as ship after ship materialized from hyperspace. But these weren't the sleek, graceful vessels of civilized space. These were brutal, angular machines of war that looked like they had been built for one purpose: destruction. Human fleet emerging from hyperspace came the transmission from the lead vessel. The voice was calm, almost casual, despite the chaos surrounding them. "This is Admiral Kim Jae of the Human Defense Force. We're here to help." What happened next defied everything Kira understood about space combat. Instead of forming the careful, coordinated formations she expected, the human ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Each vessel began moving independently. Following patterns that made no tactical sense, the Devourer swarm reacted immediately. Millions of bioships changed course to intercept the new threat, their collective intelligence analyzing the human formation and preparing countermeasures. But there was no formation to analyze. Each human ship was doing something completely different. Captain Li Min rolled his destroyer through a spiral dive that would have killed any other species. The G-forces pressed against his body like a giant's fist, but he had trained for this his entire life. His kinetic cannons opened fire, sending streams of metal projectiles into the Devourer swarm. While switching to antimatter torpedoes, he reported calmly as his ship pulled 17 times Earth's gravity. Behind him, his crew worked with mechanical precision, their bodies pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. The Devourers began to adapt, their biomechanical forms shifting to absorb the kinetic energy of the human weapons. But before they could complete the process, the humans switched tactics. Energy weapons replaced projectiles, then biological warfare replaced energy weapons. Then exotic matter manipulation replaced everything else. Their learning to slowly observed Commander Park So from the bridge of the Thunderstrike. They're used to fighting species that stick to one type of weapon system, Admiral J watched. The tactical display was satisfaction. The Devourer swarm was vast, but it was also predictable. Its hive-mind intelligence made it powerful, but also rigid. It couldn't understand opponents who made decisions based on instinct and individual initiative. All units begin boarding operations. He ordered Telenor, the Valoran observer, stared at the tactical display in horror. Boarding operations against those creatures? That's suicide. Watch and learn, Admiral J replied. Assault shuttles launched from the human carriers, streaking toward the largest Devourer bioships. The alien creatures tried to adapt their defenses, but the humans were already changing their approach. Some shuttles used stealth systems, others created false sensor readings, and still others simply flew straight at their targets while firing everything they had. Sergeant Yoon Da led the first boarding party into the belly of a Devourer bioship. The interior was a nightmare of pulsing organic corridors and mechanical implants. But she had trained for combat in environments far worse than this. Her armor's life support systems filtered out the toxic atmosphere while her enhanced muscles carried her through zero gravity with ease. Remember she called to her squad over the CUM system? They adapt to weapons, not tactics. Keep moving, keep changing, and never let them predict what you're going to do next. The fighting that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human Marines carved through Devourer bioships while exposed to hard vacuum and lethal radiation. They used plasma blades when bullets failed, switched to explosives when energy weapons were absorbed, and resorted to hand-to-hand combat when everything else was countered. The Devourers tried to adapt, but human tactics changed faster than their biological systems could process. Every time they developed a countermeasure, the humans had already moved on to something else. It was like trying to catch smoke with their claws. Captain Choi Hae coordinated the assault from his carrier, watching as his Marines fought battles that would have been impossible for any other species. He moved through toxic environments, operated in crushing gravity fields, and continued fighting even when their equipment failed. Casualties? He asked his medical officer. 17%. Wounded, 3% killed in action, came the reply. All within acceptable parameters. Telenar heard this exchange and felt his skin flicker with shock. To humans, losing hundreds of warriors was acceptable. They treated death as just another tactical consideration, something to be minimized, but never allowed to stop them from completing their mission. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Devourer's swarm, for all its power and adaptability, had never faced an enemy like humanity. They were used to fighting civilized species that valued efficiency and precision. Humans fought with controlled chaos, turning their own unpredictability into a weapon as the last Devourer bioships fled into deep space. Their swarm broken and scattered, Kira realized she was witnessing the birth of a new age. The galaxy's greatest predators had just been beaten by creatures from a single, impossible world. The space around Valora Prime was quiet now. It was filled only with drifting debris and the soft glow of emergency lights from damaged stations. Devourer swarm was gone, scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy like leaves in a storm. But the cost of victory was written across the battlefield in twisted metal, and the ghostly silence where millions of bioships had been. Ambassador. Kira floated through the corridors of the human flagship, her pale blue skin dim with exhaustion. She had never been aboard a warship before, and everything about it spoke of violence held barely in check. The walls were thick armor plating, the corridors were designed for rapid troop movement, and even the air recycling systems were built to function during combat. She found Admiral Kim Jae in the medical bay, sitting on a simple cot while a human medic treated a deep gash on his arm. Around them, dozens of wounded soldiers waited their turn for treatment. The smell of antiseptic and blood filled the air. "You're injured," Kira observed, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people. "Admiral." Jay looked up, his dark eyes tired but alert. "Minor wounds only. My Marines took the real risks today." He gestured toward the rows of beds where human soldiers lay recovering from injuries that would have killed most species. They always go first into danger. It's what they signed up for. Kira studied the wounded humans with fascination and horror. Some had burns from energy weapons, others had crushing injuries from zero-gravity combat, and a few showed signs of exposure to the toxic environments inside Devourer bioships. Yet they all seemed calm, almost casual about their suffering. Why do they accept such risks? "Because someone has to," replied Commander Park, approaching with a datapad in her hands. Her uniform was torn and stained with something that might have been alien blood. "Our world taught us that survival isn't guaranteed. You have to fight for it every single day." The medical bay doors opened, and Sergeant Yunda entered, supporting a young Marine who had lost his left arm in the fighting. The massive woman moved with surprising gentleness as she helped him to a bed, then stayed with him until the medics arrived. Sergeant Admiral J called. "Casualty report. 217 wounded, 43 killed in action." Yoon replied without emotion. "All objectives secured. The Devourer command nodes are destroyed." Telenor, the Valoran observer who had traveled with the human fleet, shuddered at the numbers. Over 200 casualties, and the humans spoke of it like a successful mission. His people would have considered such losses a catastrophic defeat. "But your soldiers died," he said, his skin flickering between blue and green with distress. "How can you consider this victory?" Admiral J stood slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at his bandaged arm. "Because 12 worlds full of innocent people are still alive. Because your children will grow up free. Because sometimes the cost of doing nothing is higher than the cost of doing something." Through the medical bay windows, Kira could see human ships moving through Valoran space, but they weren't claiming territory or demanding tribute. Instead, they were distributing medical supplies, helping with rescue operations, and sharing defensive technologies with her people. "What do you want from us?" Kira asked finally. It was the question that had been troubling her since the battle ended. In her experience, no species acted without expecting something in return. Admiral J looked surprised by the question. "What?" "Want." "Nothing. You called for help, and we answered. That's what civilized beings do for each other. But surely there must be some compensation, some trade agreement, some strategic advantage you seek." "Ambassador," Commander Park interrupted gently, "humans don't rescue people for profit. We do it because it's right." The concept was so alien to galactic politics that Kira struggled to understand it. Every other species she knew calculated the costs and benefits of military action. They weighed potential gains against possible losses. They acted based on logic and self-interest, but humans seemed to operate on different principles entirely. They had traveled across half the galaxy to fight an enemy they had never encountered, to save people they had never met, and they asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that they had done the right thing. "The galaxy will never see your species the same way again," Kira said finally. "Good," Admiral J replied. "Maybe now they'll understand that coming from a dangerous world doesn't make us monsters, it just makes us very good at stopping them." Over the following days, as the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, word of the battle spread throughout civilized space. The transmission that went out from Valora Prime was simple but profound. The humans came when we called. They asked for nothing. They gave everything. Remember this. Captain Choi Hei stood on his bridge, watching the last of his shuttles return from the planet below. His Marines had spent days helping with rescue operations, using their enhanced strength to clear debris and their advanced medical training to save lives. "All units report ready for departure," his communications officer announced. "Set course." "For Earth," Choi ordered. "It's time to go home." The human fleet engaged their hyperspace drives and disappeared into the void. They left behind more than just medical supplies and defensive technologies. They left behind a new understanding of what it meant to be strong. The Valorans would remember this day forever. Not just as the day they were saved from extinction, but as the day they learned that the galaxy's most feared warriors were also its most noble protectors, and across the stars. Other species began to reconsider their assumptions about the Deathworlders. From the third planet of Sol, perhaps being dangerous and being good were not mutually exclusive after all.